Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live installment of Curriculum of Fear, where I take a look at different educational curiosities, although they're not so much curiosities. They're not novelties. They're not so much outliers anymore. They are pretty much mainstream. I'll mention that in a moment. But good Sunday to everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. You're all awake and somehow more coherent than I am. Still waking up, even though it's been a couple hours. Well, who's with me this morning? Matt Barnes, Check Your Logic, Some Namdol Nation, Ethan Roberts, Arc 210, Mike R, Zalbla, Decode. Good morning to you all. Hope you're all doing well. So I came across this one from our friends at the National Association of Independent Schools. It's a relatively short video, and I had considered doing a scripted one on it, but it's so brief, and what she talks about is more comment-worthy, I think, than it would take the time to actually put things together. So I've seen a little bit of this already, haven't seen the whole thing, but I thought, it would make a good Sunday stream topic. Before I get into it, I just want to mention how the National Association of Independent Schools, for me, has become essentially the TEDx of education, in the sense that what you see on this channel in the variety of professionals and educators and principals and teachers and on, I really think this YouTube channel, if not the association itself, has acted for me as a bellwether for the kinds of things that, again, seemed so fringe and seemed so wacky and seemed like things that maybe only independent schools could get away with. And when I think of an independent school, I'm thinking of like a private school, schools that are not attached to the perils of federal law necessarily by taking federal funding. And yet, just as an example, racial affinity groups touted by individuals on this, touted by individuals highlighted on the NAIS channel. And then we hear it's becoming basically mainstream in some actual public schools, as the previous episode of Curriculum of Fear highlighted. So keep an eye on this channel, the NAIS channel, as well as my own, because I do think that as a clearinghouse of interesting ideas from the realm of education, it may be a warning more than anything else. But in that vein, let's take a look at this one. The title itself kind of gives you a hint as to where we're going. That title is, as I get it in front of me, Building Institutional Capacity for Sustained Conversations About Race. So we want to institutionalize sustained conversations about race in schools. This is important. This is very, very important. All right. So hello, Lexi Mads, Lurking Gopher, Simon Willikins, Mike Savage, Blarg, Citron. Hope you're all doing well. So let's get into this. This will be a relatively brief stream. The video itself is relatively brief, but I just wanted to highlight this one because of the implications as I saw them in the opening couple of minutes. So here we go. Yes, building institutional capacity for sustained conversation about race. I think I reflexively corrected the title in my own heading there on the overlay, but it should be conversations or add a before sustained, one of the two. But neither was done from the YouTube channel for National Association of Independent Schools. So
we're living in a time where there's an uptick in white nationalism.
Is there really? Is white nationalism really a popular thing right now? Is it?
And racially motivated hate crimes.
Is there, though? Is there an uptick, or are things just being highlighted more frequently? I always wonder about that. Because I keep being told about as an example of something similar, video game violence, violence increased by video games. And yet, if you actually look at the statistics, violent crime has reduced in time with the uptick of video games and culture. Now, obviously, you cannot say that video games have prevented violence, but it's difficult to say that video games encourage more violence the more they become prevalent. So I always wonder, is there actually an uptick, or are we just hearing about them more?
And it's a critical time to
Yeah.
give people the tools and the skills to not only have conversation, but to interrupt racism.
Okay, so we don't currently possess the tools and the skills to interrupt racism. So you're going to give us the tools and the skills that we all lack, because obviously racism is just, popular and commonplace, and everybody endorses it. And we lack the skills to, okay.
I think schools have a critical role in modeling.
She uses the word critical quite a bit. Critical time, critical this, critical that, critical.
Role in modeling, having conversations about race and doing anti-racism work with their students. I think schools are not excellent, and they're not doing the work of being equitable and inclusive communities unless they're specifically being anti-racist.
Okay, so schools are inherently flawed if they're not focusing on racism, and specifically anti-racist. Now, I've said this before, and I will likely say it many times in the future. Anti-racist. It's one of those phrases now that has a double meaning, I suppose. On the one hand, you could take it on its face and say that you're just simply against racism, which you would think is just the default in most places. Like, not actively being racist doesn't have to be classified as anti-racist. It's just like abstinence is not a sexual position, right? It's like anti-racist, actively anti-racist. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean necessarily, except just don't be racist, right? Do not adopt a philosophy of elevating or denigrating people on the basis of skin color. If you don't do that, that's just a natural part of your existence, not doing that. Are you anti-racist? I don't think the anti-racist would say so. You have to do something. You have to demonstrate something that shows your virtue. But that's the other thing, anti-racist, just not being racist. Or, yeah, I suppose if you see somebody being racist or whatever, just don't do it yourself. I don't know. But anyway, anti-racism as a philosophy, as promoted lately, especially by Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote the book on anti-racism, anti-racism says this. It says that there are no people who are not racist. There's no such thing as being not racist. You're either in denial of your inherent racism, or you're confessing to your inherent racism. And by confessing to your inherent racism, that is when you're anti-racist. When you are saying, yes, I understand the fatal flaw in myself, and now I will work to fight against it in others, but in myself as well forever, because I cannot cleanse myself of this sin. But anyway, so schools have to be anti-racist because they're all flawed if they're not. How do you prove a negative? I don't know.
There's no middle ground.
Right.
Either you are reinforcing racism or you are actively being anti-racist.
Right. What does any of that mean? Reinforcing racism by what does being actively anti-racist mean? Okay. I don't know that it'll be answered in this video, but let's imagine for a moment a school where there is nothing, either in policy or in outward behavior by anybody, that would indicate there's some kind of racist philosophy actually in place. Let's say that that's the case. Let's say that our speaker comes into this school and there's nothing going on, nothing is happening, but at the same time, the teachers and the faculty don't waste a lot of time dwelling on race or racism outside of those relevant elements to, say, sociology or American history or world history, etc. Okay. What would our speaker do, I wonder? And I'm honestly curious. If you don't see a program in a school that is taking time out of the day to focus on or dwell on or try to highlight race as some important factor in everyday life, is that school flawed in our speaker's mind? What should that school be doing to be, quote unquote, visibly anti-racist? Maybe she'll tell us here.
There's no middle ground there.
There's no middle ground. My way or the highway. Okay. For those of you listening at home, several cards come up in the course of the video that give sort of like place breakers. So I will read those out loud for your edification. What is the impact of our personal identifiers on leading anti-racism efforts? Let me try that one again, because even I'm having a problem comprehending that one. What is the impact of our personal identifiers on leading anti-racism efforts? Okay, I hope we understand that one shortly. Thank you, the Gay Rascal. Quote, the question is not, is there racism, but how does it manifest itself, unquote. Yes. Yes, there is no doubt. There is no question to be had. Any question you have, any doubt that you possess, indicates fault. Indicates the presence of the flaw, not the unknown if the flaw is actually there. Anyway, the impact of our personal identifiers on leading... Okay.
We can't do the work of anti-racism with students without doing it ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. And what does that mean?
Studies and theories about the best kinds of teaching and learning that happens in schools. It's when it's connected to human beings in real meaningful ways. And we actually have to own that ourselves if we're going to model it for students in a way that feels authentic and connected.
Okay. And for those of you listening at home, we're apparently, by the action on the camera, transitioning to the next section. That was her answer to the question. Okay, I'm at 126. Let me just go back. I want to find that card again. I want to read that little moment again if I can find it. Okay, what is the impact of our personal identifiers on leading anti-racism efforts? And her answer is the teachers need to be reflective of themselves in an anti-racist way before they can teach it to students. I have no clue as to what that was supposed to mean. I'm not quite sure I understand the question. B, her answer doesn't seem to address anything dealing with the question. Okay, anyway. Next card. How can schools lead conversations about race? Okay, well, that's a much more straightforward question than the first one. How can schools lead conversations about race? Okay. I can imagine quite a few possibilities, but let's hear our speaker.
I think schools have to start with leadership. So heads, administrative teams, boards need to really take a hard look at policies and procedures. So what's your hiring process? What is your admissions process?
Wait. How can schools have conversations about, and we're talking about staffing? Okay, well, first off, if you're going to have conversations about anything at school, yes, it comes down to leadership because it would be the responsibility of the teachers and or staff to set a curriculum or policy and so on. So that seems like a fairly obvious answer, almost like an unnecessary one. Because we're talking about schools, how can schools do this? You're talking about the leadership, but setting that aside, your hiring practices. your admissions practices. What does that have to do with having a conversation? What does that have to do with initiating a dialogue between one person and another? Okay, I'm going to back up a couple seconds just in case there's some overlap here.
Need to really take a hard look at policies and procedures. So what's your hiring process? What is your admissions process? What are your guidelines for the systems that you have in place? For example, if a board is all white, the answer is not just to add more people of color. It's to look at what the process looks like and what you're doing that is making it all white. It's digging a little bit more deeply so that you can get to the root causes and really do systemic change for anti-racism.
I'm a little speechless, I suppose, because it feels like there's not much that I need to add to that. But I will attempt. So in our speaker's mind, if a school board is all white, that is a problem that needs to be looked at to find how that result occurred via the school's systems, policies, and or processes. And the answer is not to simply add people of color to the board. Because obviously, if the people on the board are all white, then they only achieve those positions because the school is inherently racist. I'm assuming. She didn't say that, but I don't know how else to take that. Okay, on to the next section. What are some of the structures that independent schools can employ for systemic anti-racism? Yeah, I'm dying to know what structure would instill a school with systemic anti-racism, which honestly, anti-racism is in itself racist. So I guess you want to employ systemic racism in your independent schools. I know I'm off base in saying that. Oh, thank you, Chicago Mike. What is your hiring process is code for, quote, are you hiring enough people of color? Well, I mean, it's not even code in the way that she stated it. She's saying it very explicitly. If your hiring process leads to the wrong color people in positions of authority, then your hiring process is inherently racist. There's not really, there's no middle ground there. She danced around being specific, but there really is no middle ground in interpretation. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Sai, how many times must I say that you cannot make people of any color step forward to be in an elected office? You can encourage everybody to apply. And I guess it depends on how school boards are selected or elected. I don't know. It depends on what the jurisdiction is. I don't claim to be a school board elections expert, but according to our speaker, school board is a result of hiring practices. Depending, I don't know. Anyway, so what are some of the structures that independent schools can employ for systemic anti-racism? Okay, so that would imply to me that there are established and pre-made policies or processes that exist that can be implemented and or employed that a school can adopt to achieve anti-racism. All right, so there has to be an already established plan that someone can bring into a school. That's how I read that. Let's see what our speaker has to say.
I get this question a lot as I'm working with people on being anti-racist and thinking about systemic anti-racism.
I'm sure you get that question a lot because if you're going to achieve anti-racism and you are comporting yourself as an expert or a consultant in this field, one would assume you come with a plan already in hand. So, yeah.
I think schools need to start at the top with heads and administration and boards, and need to look at policies and procedures, need to trace back the symptoms of racism. Like, we don't have enough people of color on this, in this area or that area of the school.
Is that really the first step? Is that really the first step in employing anti-racist structures in a school? Is to assess the color tone of the school's faculty and administration? Is that the first thing you do? You go in and you take a look at the skin color of the people in charge of the school, and then you assess whether or not anti-racism policies are necessary? I'm honestly asking, is that the first step in the process?
And really look at what structures are in place that are causing that outcome.
Such as, give me an example. Give me an example, because it must be fairly commonplace, right? If so many schools carry this flaw of not actively and therefore only perpetuating racism because there is no middle ground, okay, there must be a boilerplate, common structure, common system, common policy that you've encountered over and over and over again in your work that is inherently leading to the wrong outcomes as you see it. So, and I know I'm asking rhetorically, but what is a common racist policy that schools employ? Give a free piece of advice, right? I don't know what our speaker does otherwise, but if she's a professional consultant on this or gets paid in any way, shape, or form to advise schools on this, because she implied just now that she does, what's a free one, right? Just say, if you're a school, or if you're working in a school, you're heading a school, here's a common mistake in school policies that lead to racist outcomes. Will she give us such an example? If it is so common, if it's so prevalent, there must be an easy one. There must be a softball somewhere.
I think schools need to get training, because the adults in schools have not grown up learning and understanding anti-racism.
I'm not sure that anyone talking about anti-racism actually understands what they are saying when they are talking about anti-racism. I truly believe that, because all of the anti-racism rhetoric I have heard is just racism. And so far, our speaker has done nothing to dispel that notion in my mind. Okay, well, what kind of training? All right, you won't specify what policies are inherently racist. What kind of training is going to make a non-anti-racist teacher, by your estimation, into an anti-racist teacher?
It is not something that I experienced in school as I was growing up, or even in grad school as an adult.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because the kind of policies being pushed by anti-racists are inherently racist, and the whole point of Title VI of the 1964 Act, both literally and in spirit, was meant to attempt to purge racism, structural racism, from the schools. So the fact that you didn't grow up with anti-racist rhetoric, is that a bad thing? Or was that a reflection of the ongoing attempt to not make race a relevancy?
And so we need training. We need to build our skills. We need to practice having conversations about race and hard topics, because we don't automatically have this. And I actually think the most powerful work that we can be doing is modeling for our students, not that we have all the answers, but that we're learners ourselves, right? That we are actually building and practicing along with them. I think that in some ways that's more powerful than trying to be the sage on the stage about racism. It's everybody's work.
Okay, so I don't have to know anything about what I'm talking about. I just have to say that I'm doing the virtuous thing, and that's enough. I don't have to go before the students that I'm teaching and pose as being knowledgeable or an expert in what I'm talking about. I just have to sort of say that I'm doing it and that I'm working on it and that all of you should be working on it too. I've highlighted this in many of my previous videos, whether they're scripted or otherwise. And that is the lack of specificity, the lack of detail, the lack of context. Coming from people who, by all rights, are professionals in their fields, experts, and or they have an educational background that should, in some way, shape, or form, impart on them the ability to articulate what they are talking about. Whether it's the problem they are citing or the solution that they are proposing. And yet time and time and time again, never, well, not never, but rarely do I ever get any specificity, an active example of what they're talking about, or an active example of the solution they have at hand. It's always vagaries and abstracts and just buzzwords without any kind of support to them. It's very frustrating because, as I've said before, even if I don't end up agreeing with someone, I want to understand. It's very difficult to understand an argument if one is not made, or if one is made without any kind of, I don't know, detail. Any kind of information that would give me the opportunity to assess what they are talking about, good, bad, or otherwise. So I look at this, and if I take this person at their word without, any other information, because none is on offer, it all sounds like empty rhetorical gobbledygook. It sounds like somebody who is just moralizing for the sake of moralizing without any substance. But that in and of itself is something to keep an eye out for. As you hear people talk about this stuff, you have to demand specificity. If you have the opportunity in some way, shape, or form to, either be presented with this live by a person, or you're being scolded by someone over this, or someone's talking about this, don't get angry or anything, but honestly, ask for specificity, ask for an active example, ask for something that will underline what they mean. Don't accept empty rhetoric when it comes to things like this. When you're talking about changing structures in order to promote anti-racism, that's a big idea. That is a big idea. And if someone is saying that that's something that should happen, it is not irrational. It is not unreasonable to, before anything else happens, ask for specificity. How would this be done in practice? Give me an active example. Give me an example of the problem that this is going to solve. Because giving me a solution to a problem that you haven't specified yet, or even given evidence for, that doesn't sound like a solution. It sounds like an agenda. Thank you, Cryptic, so much. That's very generous of you. Hello. Well, hello, Cryptic. How are you doing? Hope you're having a good Sunday. And thank you, Point Curation. Scribe is a good. A good what? I mean, I could be a good person, or a good streamer, or a good whiner, or a good coward. I mean, why give me that mystery point? Why leave me hanging? I need specificity. Well, I don't have anything more to go on about regarding this particular video. If you guys have a couple of things you'd like to say in the chat, otherwise I'll give a couple minutes here and then I'll just wrap this up. This is just a brief little look. I hadn't watched this whole video, but what I did see previously was, in my opinion, a good example of the kind of talking points without anything underneath them that we constantly see. And I also, again, wanted to, sort of in a sideways way, promote the National Association of Independent Schools YouTube channel as my go-to for what's going on in current thought, either on the fringes or more and more in the mainstream from education in this country and elsewhere. I think there's been some speakers on there from schools from elsewhere. It really is the TEDx of educational theories. It really is. So I like it for that reason. And that's why I keep going back to it. Let's see. Lexi Mads, where was this video from? Well, it was from the National Association of Independent Schools. The speaker, if I can find her, hold on, title here real quick without, let me mute that because I don't need to hear it anymore. Did they give her title? Do we ever see it? I don't know. One second here. Let's see. Do they ever give her title or her name? Or does she just like show up? I thought they did at some point. They usually do. They usually give like a little undercard to somebody right after they start talking. Maybe I missed it. Let's see. Maybe it's right at the beginning. Right. The first card, building institutional capacity. Okay, there we go. She is the executive director of Hackmett Consulting LLC. Okay, I guess I should have looked at that earlier on. So this is her profession of her own company in advising schools how to operate. Okay. Now, I will give the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent that if she's got the secret sauce to instilling anti-racism into schools, maybe she doesn't want to give that away on a little video for NAIS. Maybe that's why she was holding back any specifics. At the same time, that nothing was on offer except just abstracts and obscure references to training, or I think this has to happen here, I think this has to happen there. And her answers to the questions, and this is one of the frustrating things about NAIS. When I see a card that comes up with a question, I have no way of knowing if that was the question or if that's how the question was phrased to the speaker from the interviewer, because they don't give us the audio of an interviewer. So for all I know, she was answering an actual question she was asked, and her answer was relevant. Anyway, okay. So anyway, she's a professional. She's selling a product. Her product is her consulting, and her consulting consists of, I don't know, accusations and assumptions about the quality of people's minds and beliefs and character based on their skin color, and especially the values of a school based on the skin color of the people there. I'm going to see if I can find any other material from our speaker here for a future stream, just because I'm curious to know if she ever gives like a talk or a lecture, or if there's any, samples of her work somewhere. Let's see. Some emulation. Is anyone wiser on how institutional capacity is built? I don't know. She does it professionally, so presumably she knows what she's talking about. The Asia Research Directorate, or is Scribe a service? Is that like games as a service? Is Scribe as a service? That sounds awfully prostitutorial. Hal Berkstresser, pardon me. Hal Berkstresser. Scribe-Light on Can't Get Right was great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. That was a very unique experience. Kurt's a really nice guy. completely one of those 6 degrees of separation kind of occurrences. He saw something I did mentioned on Sinatra Says, and then contacted me to see if I wanted to be on the show. And he's been on a couple of TEDx's now, and I still talk to him from time to time. Yeah, I appreciate it. And go check out Kurt's stuff. He's got this series right now, At Home with Stallone, where he does this interview series with I think if I remember correctly, it's Kyle Dunnigan doing his Stallone impression with a face replace on there. It's fucking hilarious. Some emulation. One can supply ingredients without divulging the entire recipe. Scribe Light, she said nothing. Exactly, and that's the thing. I mean, I always get frustrated by some of the way they edit these things. Like, am I missing something? Are they holding something back? I'm going to try to find more information, or see if I can find another presentation from our speaker for a future stream or video, because I am curious. I always want to see this stuff in action, whether it's diversity and inclusion training or consultants like this. You always get their little promo pieces, and they don't say a whole heck of a lot because it's not really that. It's not the format they're operating in, right? They're not standing before a crowd at an office building or something and giving training. I always want to find out what exactly is being said. What does that training actually look like behind closed doors? It's rare that I find an example. I found a couple in the past, but I'll see if I can find one here. And let's see. Phantasmagoria, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Misspelled supercalifragilistic, all the same. So Lexi Mads just wanted to get that off her head. Okay, well, there you go. And yeah, Tony Klein, good as in commodity of thought. A good as scribe is a good. Oh, okay. Commodity of thought. I suppose that's one way to put it. I don't know. I guess point curation left it up for all of you to decide. Scribe is a good, and make that your own Mad Lib. But anyway, everyone, that's all I wanted to do today. I wanted to look at this real quick. I wanted to see what was the latest and greatest coming out of NAIS, and I guess in this case, coming from a consultant for schools on implementing anti-racist structures. She didn't say much, but what she said was very telling as far as that goes. I'll try to follow up on this for a future stream. But with that being said, everyone, thank you for joining me for this brief little foray into educational practices that are oncoming to us day by day. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the both of us tomorrow night, Monday night, on Satsu 2 Cents' channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we'll talk about the news of the day, news stories that you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. Thank you, Mystic Forest 25. Enjoy the tip. Well, thank you for giving me the tip. Just the tip? Everyone, I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.